Welcome to the podcast series The New Student Pharmacist, where we discuss chemistry and pharmacy, as well as leaders in pharmacy careers, community, and chemistry and pharmacy research. We encourage you to support the work we are doing and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts by subscribing for free. Note, the views on the podcast represent those of my guest and I.
Purpose of these episodes not at all for advice or medical suggestions. These are aimed to provide support to peer pharmacists in training in educational and intellectually stimulating ways. Again, these are not at all for medical advice or medical suggestions. Please see your local board and state-certified health professional. The views of this podcast represent those of my guests and I.
Okay, welcome to the New Student Pharmacist podcast experience. It is so good to have you listening in today. My guest today is Mr. Jalen Harrison. Wow, this is an interesting experience because I met Jalen recently. We attend the same university, Howard University, and we also attend the same church, Grace Covenant Church at Capitol Hill. So just a quick introduction about Jalen. Jalen has served as a Future Leaders Fellow with the African American Mayors Association. He has served as an intern for Congresswoman Sheila Sherphyllis McCormick. He has served as a political intern for the Emerson Collective, and he also served as a legislative intern for Congresswoman Jennifer McKellen. So he's done a good bit. And Jalen is also headed off to law school soon, so it's definitely a treat, I would say, to have Jalen on the podcast today. Jalen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, David. I want to just thank you for having me. This is
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah. Yeah, this is exciting. So, what inspired you to pursue a career in law, particularly in choosing UVA Law School for your graduate studies after completing your time, or as since you have completed your time at Howard?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, law was always something that I kind of wanted to pursue. I think when you're young and you're argumentative, people, try to point you in that direction.
Okay.
But the reality is I came to Howard with goals of, doing political work and really uplifting the Black community. There were some systemic issues that I saw that I was hoping to address, and I'm still hoping to address. And I thought Howard was the best place to do that. And at my time at Howard, um, both in the classroom as well as during the internships I was doing, I just saw the way that many of the issues that I wanted or hoping to solve were rooted in legal structures and legal barriers. And again, in those internships, whether it was at, you know, the congressional internships I did or at Emerson Collective, which was a philanthropic organization, the people
Mhm.
who I most kind of bonded with, the ones who was doing the work that I found the most interesting, both intellectually in terms of the actual material that they were studying and doing, as well as some of the practical implications of the work they were doing, was the lawyers. And that really solidified for me that law school was the right path for me, and that it was the right path for me to go straight through immediately, going from undergrad to UVA law. In terms
Okay.
of choosing what law school,
Mm-hmm.
I cast a wide net. I applied to a total of 12 law schools. Many of
Okay.
them were, recognized as some of the best law schools in the country. I kind of had a, short, not a short list per se, but, I kind of knew what type of law I wanted to do. I knew the type of law school I would need to go to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And, after getting the acceptances, you kind of had to take into account a few things. The first is which is what network, what school has lawyers in some of the prominent like civil rights organizations that are in the country. Your NAACP Legal Defense Funds, your Southern Poverty Law Centers. Um, Next, I had to think about like what would the cost be, right? And after I took that into account, and the last thing being culture, when I went to go visit some of these schools, where did I feel most at home? UVA really, I don't know, it just really appealed to me. Maybe it's because I'm from Virginia and that's home to me. But
Okay.
UVA it's an exceptional law school, and I'm excited to study there this fall.
Okay, dude, that's good, man. I'm happy for you, Ray. Congratulations, you are doing well. So I want to dig deep into that. So what creates or what allowed you to know that that was home for you? I know you said it's another home for you, but what aspect of the culture?
Mhm.
Because what you're pointing to, from my understanding, is also pointing to this concept of belonging, you know? So,
Absolutely.
and so culture and belonging and how they overlap. So, what aspects of the culture were you looking for as you were trying to find a university that you think would be a good fit for you, or where you would belong, or where the culture felt at home?
Yeah, it's a it's a great question. I'll say it starts early in the admissions process, right? Where like I got a good feel for the culture of the schools I was going to, that I applied to and that I potentially would attend based off, you know, what was the interview like? That was kind of the first step. And when I
Okay.
interviewed with UVA, with their director of admissions, a woman named Roseanne Ibanez, I believe I'm pronouncing her last name right, it was just a really great and kind environment. I had met Roseanne about a year prior at this minority pre-law conference that was held on William and Mary Law's campus. And immediately as I joined the interview, she remembers me. When she's talking about how she's happy to see me again, and it's just, displaying a level of kindness. I always say there's moments when interviews change into conversations,
Yeah,
right? Where
yeah,
it's no longer a situation where it's this, power dynamic of somebody just feeding me questions, but we're just communicating with each other. So that kind of really set the tone.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, you have to go, in my personal opinion, what I would suggest to other people who decide to pursue any advanced degree, you want to then go to the campus and really see how are the students living. So I go to UVA Law for a tour. I actually missed Admitted Students Day. I was working at the time. And I told Roseanne that I'd be there. And she set up a lunch with me and the Black Law Student Association, also known as the BOSA. So
Mm-hmm.
after I finished the tour, I'm with the BOSA. We're at this hotel right next to the law school. And um, they're just, everybody who was at that table was just incredibly honest about their experiences at UVA. The things that they loved about the school, as well as some of the things that they thought it could potentially be doing better. It was overwhelmingly positive. But then even after I, got through my specific UVA law questions, I mean, at the end of the day, they just cared about me as a human. Everybody who's been in this position, the reality is that like we all, for the most part, have multiple schools that we could select. And you of all people know this. I mean, you did advanced degrees. At a certain point, it's the quality of the education, regardless of where you choose, is going to be quite similar. So at the end of the day, it's where you're going to be the right fit. And they understood some of the other schools I was debating with. Many of them had also debated between attending those schools. And the vibe I got from all of them was, we would love for you to be here. We like you. We think you'll succeed here. But hey, any of these schools that you're going to go to, you're going to succeed, and we'll be happy for you, and let's stay in touch regardless, right? So it didn't feel like they were selling me. It just felt more like if this feels like home to you, come. And at the end of the day, I think that level of community that was at UVA Law, especially with the BOLSA, which is where I'm hoping to be tapped into, was really the not selling point, but really the I guess
point that convinced you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. Because even for myself, I got accepted basically to every school that I applied to or that I interviewed at for pharmacy school. And, for me at Howard, it's interesting dynamic because it was not just about rankings. It was not just about what all I can gain, but I also thought about what can I give to the environment, How do I see myself being able to grow in the environment? What areas, or just to use a little bit of technical terms, what value proposition that the school has aligns with the values that I have for myself? Which value propositions for that school aligns with my personal value, professional value propositions? So how do I see myself being able to bring value or gain value? So vice versa. Yeah, dude, that's good. And also the thing of belonging, dude, that's very powerful because, I've heard someone say, and this is actually a person of faith, she said, the moment you realize that you belong somewhere, you are able to come up with strategies and work through even the challenges because at the end of the day that you belong where you are. I mean, it's so powerful. So, how do you plan to balance the demanding workload of law school with other aspects of your life to ensure a holistic perspective on your career and personal well-being? What do you plan to do? How are you thinking about it now? Because you're about to embark. Yeah. I've lost you. Pharmacy school. It takes some time. You have some coming to Jesus moments every now and again, but that's all right. That's a part of the process. So, what would you say is your plan or strategy for self-care? Let me make this practical. So, what do you say is your plan for self-care? What would you say is your plans for like academic achievement? And certain people go into these programs trying to get 4.0. Some people don't. Some people just want to do what they do, enjoy the program and get okay enough grades so that they're able to progress to the program. So what do you see a mix looking like?
Yeah, I talked to many friends who have finished law school about this exact thing. I mean, law school is one of the more rigorous advanced degrees. It's 3 years. And it's pretty much suggested that you need to treat it like a job. It shouldn't, getting, a side job during law school is quite difficult. And some schools don't even allow you to do so, right? So it's very much a time where I'm gonna have to be committed. To answer your question, the short answer is I actually don't know fully, but this is what, when I don't know something, I tend to, again, I go to my mentors, I go to advisors, and I just ask, hey, what did you do? And the overwhelming advice I got was, and what I've seen is, hey, again, this is going to be a daunting task, but treat it like a job. A job, you work a job 9 to 5, 9 to 6. But once you get off that job, you need to take your breather. You need to make sure that you're still maintaining those same habits that you did in undergrad to go to law school. That the habits that led to success there, you need to bring that with you in law school. So I'm going to live a pretty disciplined life. I mean, I see myself, I'm somebody who loves just academia in general. I think scholarship is incredibly fascinating. So in terms of the actual material of law, that's what most excites me. And I'm not worried about delving into that at all. That's just, I love to learn. That's the kind of person I am. But yeah, I think one of the things I'm going to have to force myself to take breaks. I'm gonna need to learn how to better formulate a work-life balance because, in undergrad, you have a lot more time in undergrad than I think people get credit for. I mean, most of my time was spent outside the classroom, reading textbooks, reading material. But even outside of that, you could still do a whole bunch of clubs. You read what I did earlier. I was able to do most of those internships I did. Two of those were like during the semester. Like it was, I was able to balance that. That's not necessarily going to be possible with law school, or if it is possible, it's going to be incredibly difficult. So, I mean, it's short. That was a long answer, but the reality is I'm probably just going to call past lawyers who went through law school and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. What should I do? And get their advice. That's probably the best way. How do you balance everything?
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now. But before I tell you how I balance everything, well, for me, before I get to me, my brother's actually a lawyer. He was trained in the UK. So one of the things I've noticed with my brother, he has mastered the art of taking breaks. He knows how to take breaks. So, like, he played rugby while he was in law school. So he really pushed and really did that a lot. My brother Will Ferguson, he continues to play rugby to this day, and he's been finished with law school probably from like 2017, 2018. So I think finding a hobby, and that's something that for me, how do I maintain balance? Balance for me, it ebbs and it flows. I'm gonna be very honest with you. It ebbs and it flows. I have set priorities for myself. Like self-care is a priority. Like sleep is a priority. Nutrition is a priority. Community is a priority. Going to church for me is a part of my self-care, to be quite frank with you. So that's a priority for me. So my self-care is a priority. My scholarship is a priority. However, I know how far to push with that. This is degree 3 for me. So how I see this is a little different from degree 1 or degree 2, and I know what's required for me to progress to the next stage. And I'm learning what's going to be required for me to get into the other areas I want to get into, like either clubs or academic societies or internships. So I know how much to push and I know when to stop. That's one thing I learned recently, probably in grad school. After you've done enough, you can stop, and that's okay. That's a very powerful concept that I learned. People who are very driven, you have to remind yourself that, and I have to remind myself too, that, it's good to work, it's good, but it's also good to rest. Even Jesus rested. So too we. So we as well should rest as well. So yeah, man, that's how I do it. But I'll be honest with you, some days I'm not as balanced as I should be, but it is what it is. It is what it is.
Can I add something? Do you mind if I add something?
Go ahead, do it. This is the guest today.
Yeah. I had a professor who I think, talked about the concept of work-life balance in a way that really impacted me and that I really related to. Typically we have this idea that work-life balance means, you have these set hours where you work, 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, whatever it is. And then outside of that, you're not doing any work. You're, attending to your family, you're attending to your kids, whatever you need to do, right? But the professor is like, and do you understand this is a political guy in DC? He's like, that for me, work-life balance, it's about moments where maybe a week I'm working a lot, but then that next week I might need to take some time off to attend to the things I need to attend to, or maybe a month I was grinding really hard. And I found that when I was preparing for the LSAT, and again, I think anybody who had to prepare for any admissions test understands that these tests take a lot of work. It's really time commitment. In that seasons of my life, I was waking up at 5 a.m. to study because that's what was necessary. I didn't have any other time. So maybe I was going to bed early to make sure I could do that. But the moment, it was a weekend, or the moment where that wasn't necessary, I had to, reel myself back in and be like, okay, we're going to take this entire Sunday off, or whatever, like whatever was necessary. And this is the interesting thing I found. And of course, this is anecdotal, but when I was studying for the exam, there was a moment where, and this happened very early on during my study period, where I was like, okay, I need to study every day for 2 to 3 hours every day. That's what it takes, right? That was misguided. And the summer came around and I had friends and, my friends were in the city and I decided, okay, I actually need to take like some days off, a couple of weeks where I could just, spend time with friends and enjoy life. And I found that my scores on practice tests increased when I
Yeah.
took that time to get that mental break.
Yeah.
So just a little something to add about that work-life balance aspect we were
Really
talking
agree
about.
with you. And I've discussed this concept with probably about 50 plus people on this podcast. Some people phrase it as work-life balance. Some people call it work-life integration. Some people call it work-life fit. You know, it depends, and also it depends on the person too, you know. Yes, there are some standards for balance. There are some like basic things like self-care. You know when your self-care is out of whack.
Hmm.
But there's balance for it depends on the person. One person may have 6 kids, a demanding job, and a spouse. One person might be single. You know, balance for them looks different. Looks very different. And I think we have to be flexible with that, a definition of that, even though we have some baseline parameters for that. So, can you highlight some of your most impactful achievements or contributions during your time at Howard? What made Howard stand out to you, or what makes it stand out to you as you transition on to UVA? What has been one of your most
Hmm.
compelling or enjoyable experiences at Howard? Um, I'm new here, but I have a number of experiences I could talk about. So, what has been really enjoyable for you?
Yeah, Howard is to me, it's such a special institution. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I won't lie. There are, of course, with any school, there are problems. I feel like
Yes, 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 yes.
Howard's problems get highlighted often.
Mm,
In my personal, I think it's a little bit too much it gets highlighted, and it kind of overshadows some of the brilliance and beauty of the campus. Um, but to answer your question, Howard is unique for a couple of reasons. First, of course, it's HBCU, historically black college/university. It's arguably the most prominent HBCU. I don't say that because I go there. I am a little biased, but I still think that to be true.
nothing
Uh,
wrong with that.
but because of that, and because it's kind of known as this place that has a large alumni base, who has really prominent African American leaders throughout history who have attended the institution, you
Mm,
get a self-selection of students who are just really passionate about a variety of different topics and really smart, um, really willing to do the work in order to excel in their coursework.
mm,
And similarly, you get professors too,
mm,
many of them who specialize in, you know, uh, multiple disciplines, but also have like an Africana lens with respect to the discipline. I studied political science and I minored in philosophy. Um, and, some of the most intelligent Black people in the world are here, truly teaching.
mm, mm,
Um, so because of that, you get exposed to scholarship and disciplines that just are not available at other universities. An example I like to bring up is, I studied under one of my philosophy professors, a man named Dr. Patrick Gooden. And, he kind of was one of the earlier adoptees of like Africana philosophy. And you get to study that at Howard. You don't get to study that at other institutions.
mm,
Um, in terms of experiences, it's great. I think, here's what I say, the Howard, again, alumni base in the name really holds a lot of weight, that I found that if somebody went to Howard, they really will, go out of the way to be able to help you. And
mm. I
during
agree
my
with you.
time, during my time here, I was part of I'm part of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as the NAACP. I was on the political action committee. I joined my sophomore year as a member. My junior year, I became the engagement coordinator for that committee. And then my senior year with them right now, I co-chair the committee with a dear friend named Saida Webb. And really in my junior year, my entire goal was to be able to leverage some of the relationships and connections I developed during my previous internships and kind of bring that over to Howard University and expose our student base to those people so that they can understand what it looks like to be, to have a career in politics, right? And when
Mm,
I was a fellow with the African American Mayors Association, um, I was fortunate to speak to a whole bunch of mayors, some of the more notable, such as, Mayor Eric Adams in New York City, as well as some lesser known mayors. But by far, the mayor who I think had the most impact on me as well as the other fellows is a woman named Sean Patterson Howard, who represents Mount Vernon, New York. He also happens to be a Howard alumni,
mm,
right? So after my fellowship ended, I really wanted to have an elected official, speak to the members of our committee. So I just, cold emailed Mayor Patterson Howard, and he responded really quickly to me. He was like, "Yeah, like, I would love to speak," and we were able to set up a Zoom call, and it was just a time where he was able to feed into the students at Howard, and just give them advice and wisdom and insight about one, what does it mean to be a public servant? What does it mean to give back to your community? And it wasn't the most impactful event. There might have been 10 or 12 people on the call, right? It wasn't a scenario where there was 100 or 200. But despite the fact that there was only 10 or 12 people on that call, I know that they got something out of that call. Yeah. That the information that Mayor Sean Patterson Howard gave to us was useful and will be useful to them. Right? So that is one of my favorite Howard stories, and one that I shared with you just to show just how not necessarily easily accessible, actually, yeah, easy accessible and helpful our alumni base is. And really the fact that you can reach out to anyone. And that's one story. I have many more, as I'm sure you do, of just how the university has championed students, but also how the alumni base has been made sure to continue to give back. And that's why I love Howard. That's why I want my brother to come here. He's young, he's 14. I'm trying to get him to come here. But I'm always happy when I see another person attending Howard University.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, you made the point, sometimes the negative gets highlighted more than the positive. Yeah, you have to keep the right perspective. I think gratitude and, having a data-driven outlook allows you to see the positive for what it is, and see the issues for what they are too. But, even with issues, you can complement it, changing the narrative and complement to solving them. And then you said some other things I want to point out. Can you explain what's the Africana lens?
Oh, so this is
drink.
Yeah. I maybe shouldn't have just thrown out a word without describing what I meant by it. When I'm talking about Africana philosophy, I'm talking about Africa. Let me start over. When people say Africana, just in general, often they're talking about like all Black people throughout the diaspora, right?
Oh,
so
okay.
It's not solely attached to the continent of Africa. It's just wherever you go. There's a lot of work with respect to Africana philosophy. Somebody who's incredibly prominent in that field is Dr. Lewis Gordon, who has an entire textbook dedicated to the work. But before getting too theoretical, it's kind of this idea that there's a connection to a certain degree amongst Black people as a response to just the experiences of oppression that many people go through post like the colonization of Africa, like that inciting event lead to some level of connectivity. This is not to say that all Black people are the same or that Black people are modern. I'm very clear in what I'm saying. And I would advise people to go read up on African philosophy if possible. But so when I say that, like Howard has an Africana lens, a great example I like to bring up is in the political science department, there is a political theory and there's a Black political theory. These are two separate classes. And I took political theory, and I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference between the political theory and the Black political theory because so much of the text that we're reading is Black scholars speaking from a Black perspective.
Yeah. It's a lot. Dude, this is the thing, and I'm just going to say, Black people have contributed in so many unique ways to the advancement of science, mathematics, and other fields. And, we hear about even music. You hear about it later on, like hundreds of years later. Oh, this is actually done by a person of color. This is actually done by a Black person. Katherine Johnson, the woman mathematician, she did those calculations for the flight trajectory by hand. Can you imagine that? David Blackwell, the Black mathematician, all of these big, huge players. And, unfortunately, because of bias, we hear about their stories later on, and they don't get the recognition, or they get recognition at a delayed interval from a delayed standpoint. But it is what it is. We just have to work the situation and work the system as best possible. But yeah, the last thing I'll say before we continue in this conversation, you talk about your mentors. It's so good to have good mentors, dude. Having people who can speak directly into your situation, and also who respond quickly to emails. Because sometimes, my mentors, 3 big players outside of my parents, 3 big mentors I have. a few mentors I have, Dr. Langa, Dr. Bea, and Dean May. I mean Chancellor May. You know, they're some of the most phenomenal, down to earth, hardworking people I've met outside of my family. So yeah, dude, as how do you plan to foster as we start to wrap
David,
up? How do you
do you mind if I add one more thing? Actually, I want to mention
go ahead,
something
dude,
to
go
what you
ahead.
were saying
You're the star,
because
man. Star.
yeah, you brought up mentors and you brought up just people who've helped you along the way. And I think this is important to the question you asked previously about the Howard experience and you know what I've thought about this. Somebody who I am incredibly grateful for outside of like my family, but on the university is a man named Dr. Brandon Hogan, who he's in the philosophy department. He went to Howard University for undergrad. He went to Harvard Law, and he also went to University of Pitt for his PhD in philosophy. And he's my favorite professor. I'll say that publicly. But he's the reason why. One, I've learned so much from him just studying under him. The way he teaches philosophy is very analytical. Having to explicitly craft arguments and make sure that they're both valid and sound was very beneficial for me, not just in terms of writing and reading, etc., but also like for the law school admissions tests alone. Like that was a beneficial skill. Without that class, I don't know how well I would have done on the exam. But more so, when I was, preparing my written materials for law school, he was the guy who I would go to have him read through it. And I remember I sent him a personal statement, and the first time he reads it, he's like, in like corporate speak, but I'm gonna paraphrase, this ain't it. Like it's okay, but it's not what it is.
Yeah.
It's not what it needs to be. Okay, I sent another draft.
Mm.
This is better, but it's still not there.
Wow.
I sent another draft. Let's have a meeting. Come to my office after class. I said, okay. I go to his office and we spend time just sketching out, like, getting to the heart of why do I want to go to law school? What do I want the admissions team to know about me? And how do I make that a compelling narrative? Right. So I do that. I send it to him again, and then he continues to get notes. And eventually it reached the point where it was good, where it's something I would be proud to be able to submit to these schools, right? And I owe a lot of, I think, my success with respect to getting into law schools on the fact that he just took the time to read my materials and feed into. And it's not just him. I could mention Professor Jay Stewart, who's also at the university, who's been super helpful. A whole bunch of professors who just take the time when they don't need to do that. That's not part of their job. Their job is to teach you, and you can go to office hours if you need to. They don't need to spend extra time going through your law school materials, but they do. And I think that's something that's really special about Howard.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I can think of some professors I'm starting to interface with, considering this is my first year. But even before I get to them, some professors I could name a few, like Dr. Aldifi, Dr. Turner. One of my favorite, I won't state who is my exact favorite, but one of my favorite professors for pharmacy is Dr. Deshna, Simon Deshna. He's my favorite professor. My favorite expression I use is, let's be clear in your mind. Be clear in your mind. So as you're doing the calculation, be clear in your mind. I'm like, yeah, I need to be clear. So I thoroughly enjoy his class. But yeah, it's a similar story. My dad was the one who actually helped me with my pharmacy essay. My dad's a physician, Wolf Ferguson. My dad, he did the same thing to me when I gave him the essay. He was like, David, this ain't ready. That's what we speak back on. David, this ain't ready. He said, I would not let you into my pharmacy school with this essay. You need to rewrite this. And he told me that straight up, and I'm glad he did. Because that allowed me, to do a quick check, check how I was writing, check my perspectives, really go back to the drawing board and really put in the time to write a good essay. And that I know for a fact that complimented to me being able to make the strides I was able to make in the admissions. Of course, by God's grace, but the work, you have to put in the work. So my dad helped me tremendously. And also my mom, dude, to this day, I still send scholarship essays to my family members.
Wow.
I still do it, because it's one thing to read an essay and to think you have it together. It's another thing to share your work with someone else and they pull your feet back down to earth and say, you need to fix this, And even, dude, my thesis, I could talk about my thesis. Trust me, I'll be brief. But my thesis, dude, with my thesis advisor was so particular, down to the spaces after the periods, down to the spaces between the oxygen and the negative sign, down to the formatting of the tables, down to the italics, and everything should be uniform in its italics. Down to the references, it should be alphabetized, down to the structures, and make sure the biosynthetic pathways are accurate. And if you can't show them an accuracy, shorten them and show what you can in an accurate way. You know? So, but yeah, dude, as we conclude, what advice do you have for those wanting to pursue law school or wanting to come to Howard? What advice does Jalen, my recently found buddy from Howard and from Grace Covenant, what advice does he have for them?
Yeah, with educate, I have a deep love for education, and I think everybody should always be learning. You should be reading books. You should be listening to podcasts. Just any way you can pursue wisdom is important. With respect to law school, I think one of the things that really benefited me at Howard was, a flip kind of switched for me early on, where you first get to university and the goal is I just want to get A's. I just want to get A's, do well, and my goal kind of changed as I pursued my studies further. Really, what I wanted to do is I wanted to learn as much as I can, and I wanted to submit work that not only I was proud of, but also that my professors could respect. And when you do that, you will also get A's, but you'll get a lot more too, And I think for the student who wants to, it's in Howard. If you do want to come here, this is a great place to be. I highly recommend it. But when you get here, you need to work. When you get here, you need to feed back into the school itself, and you need to, do what you can in order to, further your goals, whatever that end goal would be. For someone who wants to do law school, to give you practical advice, two incredibly important aspects of law school is your GPA and your LSAT score. They're not everything. I want to be very clear, they're not everything, but they're just two big parts. You're also going to make sure you, have some experience, maybe do some internships, do some flows, figure out why you want to go to law school and how you can be a good fit for that school. But with respect to the GPA, again, you want to put your best foot forward during your studies and make sure you're getting a high GPA, because the schools, we're seeing great inflation happen. And if you look at, for example, GPA medians at law schools, even 10 years ago, they're very different than what they are now. They're much higher now than they were 10 years ago, right? And with the LSAT, I think the LSAT, it's a difficult exam. It's an exam that I actually really do appreciate, because it takes a long time, or at least for me, to have gotten good at it, or to improve. And you could look at it two ways. You can look at it as, oh man, I have to take this hard exam. That's unfortunate. Maybe I don't want to put in the work. Or you can look at it as an opportunity for you to kind of separate yourself from other people who are also attempting to get into the same schools that you're trying to get in. So I think the LSAT is one of the best investments you can make. If you have the ability to pay for a course or get a subscription to like a LSAT platform. I used a platform called LSAT Demon. I highly recommend you do that, because even 2 or 3 or 4 point improvement is going to, jump you in front of thousands of applicants. And if it's the case that you do not have the finances to do so, there's a couple options. Khan Academy has a free LSAT resource that I would recommend if you can't do anything. But also, a lot of these platforms offer fee waivers for people who are under certain, economic thresholds. And I would just do your research and look into that. But yeah, my main advice is basically take your studies seriously, and always pursue knowledge. And I think you really can't go wrong if you do those two things.
Yeah, man, this is good. This is good. So, Jalen, thanks again for joining me today. It was so good to have you on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast series, The New Student Pharmacist, where we discuss chemistry and pharmacy, as well as leaders in pharmacy careers, community, and chemistry and pharmacy research. We encourage you to support the work we are doing and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts by subscribing for free. We are so glad that you were able to tune in today. Note, the views on the podcast represent those of my guest, and I take care and all the best.